President Trump is continuing his push to fill the vacant seat on the Supreme Court before Election Day. The president is also continuing to raise concerns about the legitimacy of the election. On Wednesday, he suggested that the outcome may be decided at the courts, not the ballot box. It all comes as our CBS News Battleground Tracker shows the president trailing Joe Biden in the race to win the Electoral College. Weijia Jiang is at the White House with the latest.
President Trump revealed why he's rushing to nominate a justice to the Supreme Court, anticipating a battle over the election results.
I think this will end up in the Supreme Court, and I think it's very important that we have 9 justices.
The president wants Congress to confirm his pick before November 3rd.
We were elected. We have a lot of time. One justice was picked in 19 days. 19 days.
The monumental decision could reshape the race that was largely focused on Mr. Trump's handling of the pandemic.
Is he going to walk in with a mask?
At a packed rally last night, just as the U.S. death toll crossed over 200,000, President Trump made light of Joe Biden covering his face.
I mean, honestly, what the hell did he spend all that money on the plastic surgery if he's going to cover it up with a mask? Seriously, the whole deal.
Doctors on the coronavirus task force say masks are the best protection against the virus.
These face masks are the most important, powerful public health tool we have.
But the president often rejects their views, relying instead on Dr. Scott Atlas. Mr. Trump handpicked the radiologist who has no experience with infectious diseases to be a medical advisor. Today, the White House denied a report that Dr. Deborah Birx, the coordinator of the task force, is distressed and unhappy over Atlas's influence. But CBS News has learned Birx is just one of several members of the task force who have clashed with Atlas.
The president's push to fill Justice Ginsburg's seat is shaping the race for the White House. Joe Biden called the rush to push through a nominee a, quote, abuse of power, and told voters to make their voices heard. A group of recent polls show the former vice president picking up steam in several traditionally Republican states. Ed O'Keefe has more.
Joe Biden traveled to North Carolina today, fresh off picking up yet another endorsement from a prominent Republican.
Let's vote for Joe Biden.
This time it's Cindy McCain, the widow of John McCain, who ran against Barack Obama and Biden in 2008.
I'm not changing my registration or anything like that. But right now, I believe that the person in the race that's the best one that represents me is Joe Biden.
McCain's husband served as the senior senator from Arizona, where a new poll today shows Biden tied with President Trump. He fired back today on Twitter, reminding followers that he's no fan of the late senator. Other polls show Biden and Mr. Trump virtually tied in the battleground states of Florida and Georgia. And as Biden tries to stay ahead, he's focusing on the economy, coronavirus, and race relations, which he discussed today with black leaders and educators.
We have a gigantic opportunity to fundamentally change the systemic racism and the systemic problems that exist in our system.
He also warned that a more conservative Supreme Court could spell the end of the Affordable Care Act.
Go to the American people and make the case why this is a gigantic mistake and abuse of power.
Some Democrats want to add seats to rebalance the Supreme Court. Biden has opposed the idea of so-called court packing, but now won't go there.
Let me tell you, I'm not going to answer that question. The discussion should be about why he is moving in a direction that's totally inconsistent with what the founders wanted.
Weijia Jiang and Ed O'Keefe join me now. Weijia is a CBS News White House correspondent, and Ed is a CBS News political correspondent. Great to have both of you with us. Weijia, I'm going to start with you. The president addressed reporters just a little bit ago and made comments about a potential coronavirus vaccine. What did he have to say about that?
Well, the president has been touting this coronavirus vaccine now for several months, and certainly in recent weeks, because he wants to make clear that it could be ready before Election Day. And, this is something that he plans to use as a winning point, even as his own health experts have testified under oath that the timeline is not exactly as quick as he would like it to be. But he did announce that there is progress with a couple of the companies. I should say, though, that there was some bigger news than the coronavirus.
Yes, I want to ask you about that.
Even though that was his intention. Right. So, you know, we often
that
see
one's
the
more
president.
Shocking.
Exactly. I mean, the president often likes to lead with what he considers achievements that he wants to inform the public about, even though, you know, they aren't always consistent with medical experts. But then he started taking questions, and he was directly asked if he would commit to a peaceful transfer of power regardless of the outcome of the election, and he refused to do that. He said, "We'll see." And again, you know, went on a rift about how mail-in ballots would lead to fraud. He has said many times before that the only way he will lose is if the election is rigged. And now he says that's why it's so important to get his Supreme Court nominee confirmed, because there must be 9 justices, in his view, to sort out what he believes will be a fight over election results.
Well, let's bring Ed into this conversation here. Ed, you heard Weijia recount what the president had to say, that the only way he believes that he could lose is if the election is invalid in his mind, that he would not commit to a peaceful transition of power, which is unheard of in most presidential elections. And I want to turn back to those polls that you mentioned in your piece. However, they show Biden tied with President Trump in a lot of very solidly previously Republican states, including Arizona, Florida, and Georgia. Tell our viewers why the race is so close in those areas.
Yeah, the Biden campaign is laser focused on Arizona. They are convinced, given the changing demographics and sort of who lives in the state now overall, they believe that this state is really gettable. They're also going to be helped potentially by Mark Kelly, who is the popular Democratic U.S. Senate candidate on the ballot. They believe that there's going to be a lot of interest in voting for him, the former astronaut, the former husband of Gabby Giffords, and that helps buoy Biden's chances there. Georgia's interesting as well. Remember, about 2.4 million more voters have been registered in Georgia over the last 6 years or so. Democrats convinced that they may now have enough to make it happen, and there are 2 competitive Senate races there as well. So, you know, poll after poll showing close races. A lot of it jives with the CBS battleground tracking that's been done throughout the summer. Our surveys, not to toot our own horn, but why not, often seen in the industry as some of the best, rarely disputed by either side. And now we're starting to see state-based polling done by news organizations in those states or other organizations finding that it's also tick-tock tight. So that's why the president's saying things like that. We have to remember that. This shouldn't surprise anyone at this point. It probably doesn't shock that many people. Maybe it still does. But part of the reason he does and says those things is to convince his base to turn out and say, look, stay tuned. This is suspenseful. And unless he wins, he feels, at least that's what he's saying for now, he's not going to concede. But we'll see. I mean, he says a lot of things and then does things later. And ultimately, it all depends on what the results are.
Well, Ed, you mentioned Mark Kelly, who may be essential in the upcoming confirmation battle that we see brewing. Walk us through how the Supreme Court battle is playing out on the campaign trail. What issues are the Democrats and Republicans using to highlight this?
Sure, and he could be central, of course, to the Supreme Court fight because he is technically filling the former a seat through a special election, and there are lawyers in Arizona who believe he could actually be seated before the end of this year, which means he could be involved in the lame duck session and potentially be there for a Ginsburg vote. Both campaigns talk about this in very different ways. For the president, it's everything right now. Fill the seat, fill the seat. That's what his supporters chant at his rallies, and the president laser focused on doing this, dragging this out till Saturday, announcing it after Ginsburg's services have been held here in Washington. For Biden, talks about it a little differently, saying that what he believes is going on here is counter to what the founders wanted, that this isn't exactly how it's supposed to work, but also making the broader argument that if there's another conservative justice put on the court, things like the future of the Affordable Care Act, abortion rights, civil rights, climate change policy in this country could all be at risk. Democrats believe and remember from 2 years ago that the more you talk about kitchen table issues, and now on top of that, the legal risk to those kitchen table issues, the more likely they believe they can successfully turn out the voters they need, especially in those parts of the country where they did so well in 2018. Remember, suburban swing districts, predominantly or traditionally Republican areas, those are the kinds of voters, the kinds of regions of this country that Biden is banking on, helping him in places like Arizona, Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina, where he was today.
All right, my last question's a quick one for the both of you. The first presidential debate is now less than a week away. Weijia, what can you tell us about how President Trump is preparing?
Well, his close aides tell us that he is preparing every day. And, you know, because he's taking so many questions, because he's doing so many interviews, because he is always on and ready. And to some degree, that's right. I mean, the president does take a lot of questions from reporters, and you can imagine they will be similar to the ones that he will get when the moderators speak to both him and the former vice president. But they have not, you know, revealed much about any formal strategy other than, you know, what we should assume they are doing, which is pretty standard operating procedure, you know, filling in with different people playing the role of Biden, practicing behind the scenes. But certainly they are keeping a close hold on what else he's doing. You know, if you talk to those around him, they'll just say he's preparing every minute of the day.
All right, Ed, what about Joe Biden? How is he preparing?
Well, one other bit of standard operating procedures that an incumbent president often says they don't need to rehearse, and then they have a terrible first debate. It happened to George W. Bush in 2004. It happened to Barack Obama in 2012. Let's see what happens to Donald Trump next week. As for Biden, he told reporters today while on his way to North Carolina that formal preparations begin and rehearsals begin tomorrow, that he has been working on it over the last several weeks. He has said publicly a few times that one of the things he wants to do during a debate is serve as a live fact checker. My only question about that is, are you going to spend too much time doing that and not necessarily explaining to Americans what it is you would do? What affirmative things might you be able to share during a debate? We'll see. One other thing, consider this. While the president does, and I think they're right to say this, rehearse every day and prepare every day by virtue of being out there and by virtue of having sat with Chris Wallace for an interview in August, Chris Wallace being the first moderator next week, Biden has been debating over the past year. And remember, he began... people were concerned about his delivery, concerned he wasn't quite there, concerned that he would kind of shirk from the noise and the hysteria on stage. But as the cycle progressed and as he got to the end when he only debated Bernie Sanders back in March, many believed, okay, you know, he's sorted this out. So his team would probably say, though they might not say it publicly, that he has sort of gone through his paces over the past year, and so doing 3 more with the ultimate opponent, the president, may be something that he's ready for. We'll see. But think of it, guys.
We'll be watching it.
Two old guys. Well, I was just going to say, 2 old guys in their 70s hectoring each other for 90 minutes. It's going to be quite a scene.
A scene that we'll all be watching so eagerly.
I can't wait.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, Weijia Jiang, thank you both.